Daniel. Hi, everybody. My name is Sherman Scholten. I'm look after sales and marketing and some product management at Obihai. So we can get pretty technical if you like. I should be able to handle it. Otherwise, I can definitely get the right people involved. How many of you out there have touched a SIP hardware endpoint? Probably everybody, right? How many of you have maybe touched, let's see, I'll go back in time, say a Cisco SPA endpoint, okay? And how many of you have touched a Sapura SPA endpoint, okay? And how many of you have touched a Cisco ATA 186, okay? And this will be good. How many of you have ever touched a Komodo device? Okay, there you go. So the Komodo device was probably on the market in 1999, something like that, maybe a little bit earlier than that. And that was, in effect, probably one of the first, if not the first, voice over IP endpoints. And what made it special, quite frankly, from a impact on the market, was that you got a device that would convert a telephone, regular standard telephone, to a SIP endpoint for, even back then in 1999, I think it sold for under $100. I happen to be at Lucent Technologies selling, 720 port big iron gateways at that time. We didn't even sell a 720 port gateway for under $100 a port back then. So here was an entrepreneur that came up with a way to make a really low-cost embedded system device, and really it kind of hit the market at the right time. Broadband was just starting to be deployed. DSLAMs were coming out, and people were getting broadband at their homes and businesses. And then companies like Vonage started up, and they really pushed to have these type of devices. This made their business model work. And then here in Europe, Telio, for example, they started their service, and these devices tend to be one of the most expensive capital outlays that a service provider has to dish out. And this is where that provisioning piece is critical, because if you're going to invest in these devices and you're going to send them out to subscribers, you want to be able to manage them. So the team at Obihai is pretty much directly responsible for all of those devices that pretty much all of you have touched one way or another. And it's kind of funny because the owner and entrepreneur, he continually sees that there's a space for innovation in this product category, and it really has to do with how the market is evolving, fairly pragmatic approach to the whole thing. And this latest iteration is really all about management. The company was founded to look at the SIP endpoint or the VoIP endpoint from a little bit different angle. Given all the experience that we had in deploying networks or the endpoints for networks of thousands of service providers, that bootstrapping piece, that was definitely a problem. And I think that we did a pretty good job solving that with innovating on the remote redirection server. When we would ship products from the factory, they would automatically connect to a redirection server and then to your provisioning server. And that was actually an innovation that we did while at Linksys. But the next thing was, what happens on day two? What if the customer changes their D-Link or Netgear or some other fine piece of equipment that they're using for their internet access? That could totally stop the communication of the VoIP device, or at least mess up the SIP piece. Maybe you can still get an IP address, but can't register. So then what do? Well, you either get on the phone, and depending on these type of customers, if it's not a tech-savvy person, your customer service agent could literally spend an hour or more just trying to do something very, very simple. So this is where the concept of integrating a cloud tether to these kind of very basic VoIP ATAs and IP phones came about. And this is really what the company was founded on. Now, since we're a hardware company and we earn revenue by making hardware, the first device that we came to market with was an analog telephone adapter. We always had a vision to make IP phones, and we do have them here. I think maybe last year's event, maybe we had a prototype here. I wasn't here, somebody else was. But now we've got the first generation line of phones out. And this is really where I think we can hit our stride, serving the market for directly fulfilled CPE, as well as possibly opening up some new opportunities for some of you providers who don't want to buy your own service, your own products. A lot of service providers now, they would rather have the customer go get their own device, get it at Amazon. .de, get it at Amazon.fr, get it from some store, but they still have to be able to provision it. They still have to be able to manage it. So a funny thing happened in the process of making these ATAs and putting together this cloud. A couple of the engineers at Obihai figured out how to use a documented way to connect embedded system to the Google Talk service run by Google. And Asterisk had done the same thing, and so we made our little $50 devices able to connect to Google Voice. And in the U.S., you can get a free phone number and free calling with a Gmail account. Now, with an Obi, you can actually make that device register directly with Google Service, and now you have a free phone. So in January 2011 is when we released the firmware that allowed an Obi ATA to be able to use a Google account. And it's called Obihai Technology. And the technology piece is there for a reason. We are a technology company. We implement technology in our products. We're not a marketing company. This is about as flashy as we get when it comes to marketing, is trying to come to events like this. So given that this opportunity with Google might present itself as something fantastic to a marketer, right? You can give people a free phone service. We don't quite see it that way. We still have our eyes on this market that's actually a lot bigger for us. The SIP IP phone market is probably, in our category, in this third-party call control category, it's probably a $2 billion market for us, both on the premise hosted and the cloud hosted, and what everything in between there. So that's really still the premise of the company, but we couldn't ignore the fact that we're selling thousands of devices a week now at Amazon and Newegg for people that are using Google. And so what enabled that to happen was our cloud management platform. We had to respin it relatively quickly to allow an end user to get an account and to add their device to their account, and then to add their Google service to the account. But what that did immediately was it started to give us the learnings, definitely created pain points of when you've got thousands of endpoints that are being provisioned by your cloud every day. Now, what if we have to roll out a new feature, or we have to fix something in the cloud? How does that affect the users? And believe me, we're not going to staff a call center of customer support people to help these people, and we don't. Yet the product continues to be a bestseller. So we kind of had to slow down, I guess, a little bit on the service provider focused cloud piece, but I think it's probably a good thing, because it really allowed us, like I said, to scale the performance of this cloud management and provisioning piece of our solution. And now, especially that we have the IP phones, that's actually a much bigger market than the ATAs anyway. So I think now's a good time to move forward. So really, we've got a lot of experience in managing or helping people manage their devices all over the world. Our devices are deployed in 180 countries. Just very quickly, kind of what the company does in terms of the technology. Well, we have IP phones, we have ATAs, specialize in real-time communications using those devices, although there's lots of interesting things that we can do, given that they've got the connectivity to a service in somebody's home or business. This is an opportunity for you as a service provider to launch other services. Because we've got these devices all tethered to the ObiTalk cloud, we actually implemented a way that they can call each other. So that's kind of a cool thing to do as well, is you don't even have to sign up with a service. You just have a number on the back of your Obi device, and you can just plug it into the internet, call your friend's number, and boom, you're talking. Now, we use that for some other more service-related things. For instance, doing like a trombone call, but maybe you want to call back through your SIP service, but you want to call through the ObiTalk and back through your SIP service. You can do that, and that's one of the reasons why we created this functionality. And then also, it's multi-protocol, and the devices can switch between protocols, conference multiple protocol calls together, and does it pretty effectively. And then also the voice-related security, very important piece these days. I'll kind of go through in terms of the management history of the devices, kind of how security became more and more and more important. But you'd be surprised, or maybe you're not surprised, how many service providers continue today to not secure the SIP accounts that they're provisioning on these devices. And it's not because the endpoints don't have them. It's either a problem with how to deploy a HTTPS server. Do they have the right skill set to do that? Do they have the time to do that? It's a variety of ways. We try to have good documentation out there. It can always improve, but maybe we're not telling the customers how to do it good enough, but well enough. So one of the things we did with this cloud is, we built a HTTPS provisioning platform as an optional thing to use as part of ObiTalk. So we have several service providers with tens of thousands of units, and they're actually using our cloud as their provisioning platform, and it's secure. So that's good. We also have to build quite a bit of networking functionality into the devices, as well as be able to manufacture them for large scale. So experience there. TR69, of course, is another way to manage these devices. That's optional there. And our own cloud, and then the team has quite a bit of enterprise networking experience as well. So we do see that there are some large opportunities. Many of those are probably opportunities that your business is fulfilling for these large enterprises, but they're moving away from their Siemens and Nortel and Lucent, AT&T PBXs to something in the cloud. And this is something that Obihai recognizes and builds devices that can fit into those type of deployments. So the P2P piece in the products via the ObiTalk cloud, that's really an important thing to be able to manage these devices, because you have to be able to cut through the NAT. And so using well-known ports, being able to do some things using P2P technology really helps us manage that. And then also the building into that the zero-touch customization of the devices. Now, this is essentially this redirection functionality that a lot of vendors out there have in their products today. That's something that we came out with early on at Cisco for service providers. And really, what this allows the service provider to do is to have a customized device. This is from a software default setting standpoint, so that if the device is ever factory reset, it doesn't go back to the manufacturer's defaults, which is basically no service configured. It goes back to your defaults, and that would probably most important thing is it would call to your, it would redirect to your provisioning server. So of course we need to have that. That's kind of a table stakes feature that we need to have in our product to have it be viable in today's market. But we've kind of added a little bit or added a lot to that by not only being able to redirect the devices to your provisioning server in this kind of zero-touch fashion, but then also adding it to the portal of the ObiTalk cloud for kind of what I talked about, that day two day two management. And like I said, for those service providers who didn't have a provisioning server built on their own, or maybe they had a provisioning server but they weren't happy with how it performed or its security and they're using ours, then that ZT, that zero touch, is still critical. They still need their service to be provisioned on the device, but instead the ObiTalk cloud can do that for them. The management portal is kind of what the service providers and end users use today. There's a consumer version and a service provider version. And then we also have some REST APIs to be able to activate services on the devices. One is if you come to the ObiTalk portal, well, a lot of people are using Google, right? So they're kind of going down that path when they add a device to ObiTalk. But some people don't want Google. They don't want Google as a phone service. We have other service providers that are participating in a approved service provider program who access an API from our portal, and this redirects them to a service provider's bring your own device sign-up page. So they sign the customer up, they collect their credit card information or whatever amount that they need for the prepay of their service, and then through the API, they post back the configuration through ObiTalk and brings that customer into service. So that customer never needed to know a SIP URL or a SIP password or SIP username. All they did was give their credit card information to the service provider, and the API does the rest. And then, of course, the interop with third-party call control platforms, that's really the core of our business. We had an extremely successful product line at Sapura and Cisco, and especially at Cisco, it was a challenge, right? Because third-party call control is not the first thing that jumps off your tongue when you say that word, when you say Cisco. But all the same, these products, it's a great brand, and these products really grew into the market with that brand and that functionality. But now is kind of the next phase, and that's what we're doing here at Obihai. So with that, there's this concept of interface or line. You could say FXS port if it's an ATA, or it's a line button if it's a telephone, and it's associated with a SIP account. That's kind of the way that a lot of these devices have been architected, and that's kind of the way that the group started when it was Komodo and Sapura. Well, at Obihai, we've kind of mixed things up a little bit. We've put a service switching layer in between the physical interface and the logical services, and we've added multiple types of interfaces that can support a service. So not only can you have the SIP and Google and the ObiTalk interface kind of in the VoIP world, but you can pair a cell phone with Bluetooth. That becomes a service interface. We have a FXO line, telco line to USB adapter. That becomes a service interface. So this is where this service switching layer really comes in handy, because you can really bring a lot of services into the Obi, and you don't even need to use the Obi devices as an endpoint. You can use them purely as a service-to-service bridge. And so, for instance, we have people using the Bluetooth functionality in the devices, so that where in areas of the world where there is no internet, but there is maybe a GSM, cell phone functionality, you'll call from that area that has no internet via cell phone to an Obi that is paired with a cell phone that the Obi has internet connectivity and a VoIP account, and you can bridge it to anywhere in the world now, and all from a local cell phone call. So that doesn't use any of that bridging Obi's endpoint VoIP functionality. It becomes a pure bridge at that point. We also have developed WebRTC. We're kind of just getting started with this, so with this is really where I think we need to partner with more technology companies to really make this a solid aspect of our product. But we do have in the product the ability to become a WebRTC client and gateway. So we use ObiTalk today to get the session initiated, but then the media flows direct using from the browser to the device. And then also with the USB, we've implemented the LTE dongles, and that's a great business continuity or instant internet type thing. And then the scripting language for the phone. This really allows you to have a customized interface for your customers. So back to the cloud-managed VoIP. So the ObiTalk Cloud is really kind of at the center of this, And it can be turned off. It's an optional piece of the product. You don't have to use it. But really, the ObiTalk Cloud gives you another tether into the management framework of the device so that you can do things like peer into the web page. We open a pinhole into the device's web page. So just like it's sitting on your desk, you can look at the web page via the cloud. You can also do something simple like reboot the device. That's a lot of times more challenging, or maybe you guys know it can be a challenge, but to be able to do it from anywhere in the world via login to the web portal, it's great. And also adding the service to the device. That's another piece where the ObiTalk Cloud has really proven successful. Back to the Google example, and I think this is something that a lot of companies in this space can take note of, is that consumers out there, when they want to buy a service, might be because they want to save money, might be because they're starting a small business and they don't know where to go, so they go to Amazon. The ability to add a service to these devices is critical, but the ability to add it in a way that's easy for your average person. Obviously, we like them to be a little bit internet savvy, so that's why we like selling on places like Amazon. At least they have to go to the internet to get it. But this is really an opportunity, I think, for everybody, and that's why I think cloud-managed VoIP, we're not going to be the only one that's in this space. We kind of are today, but this is pretty much the MO for the company. Based on how the founder implements technology, it's very lawyer light, right? I mean, when you're doing a technology company, one aspect is to develop a lot of IP and protect it with patents. That's not our style. Our style is to put it in a product and see if somebody will give us money for it. And so that's why a lot of things that are in a lot of other vendors' devices, they all started out with this team. But the thing is we're still at the tip of the iceberg in this telecommunications endpoint opportunity. It's just going to grow and grow and grow and grow. So really, it's kind of about the volume. So looking at how devices have been managed, kind of coming in through time, this is the Cisco ATA-186. I can't even remember how the Komodo phone was managed. I think it had zero management. I think the only way to get it configured was you had to connect a telephone to it, and there was this little piece of paper, and there were some IVR codes. There was absolutely no response. You just were like, you hope you did it right. And if it didn't connect to the H323 gateway, well, then start over, right? So I remember sitting in an office from about, it was like after lunch to probably about 8 p.m. one day trying to configure one of those things. And then I went and worked for the guy. So anyway, but it's really been, but it started out basic because that's what we had. I mean, that was we didn't have much else then. There wasn't even a web server on the device. But then that was added.
There was an FTP server on it.
FTP on the ATA-186, right? Okay, yeah, because then that was added. That was added. And then with Sapura, we actually added. We really developed the web page more to make the web page much more friendly, develop an XML schema for the web page, and then actually added HTTPS. That was the beginning, and so that was a great thing back then to be able to do HTTPS and then protect that, send an XML through there, and then also the TR69, TR104 came about that time as well to do that. It's kind of funny thing, relates to what I said about the MO of the company not being lawyer heavy. The working group that is pre-TR in the DSL forum, they actually use the Sapura provisioning guide as part of the framework. Polycom was another major contributor. I think Bell Canada and Bell South were as well. But the whole TR69 standard and some of the, I think the value tags in that are from the team at Obihai. But I think as we enter into the cloud management era, it's really all about the services. And it's not just the voice services, although the voice services is where we pay our bills from. There's lots of other things that we can do, given that this is an internet-connected device. It's in your home. It's in your business. And given this connection from the cloud and the ability to have an API, we can really do a lot of interesting things. But right now, based on kind of an opportunistic direction, the BYOD, the bring your own device to a SIP account, to a Google account, that's really been fantastic. And for the hundreds of thousands of people that are using that, it continues just to chug away every day. But then for the service providers, this connectivity, this tether to the cloud, this really makes their life a lot easier because now they can tell a customer, get a device and go to this web page, either enter this activation code or sign up here and we'll take care of the rest. The cloud does that for them as well. And now then we're starting to look at ways to build out the API as well as create a hierarchy because of the kind of the channel approach to the market. Many of you in the sales side, you don't have a lot of salespeople. You have a lot of agents, or you have a distributor, and you work through them to get the product to your customers. So there are things that we need to open up in the cloud to enable this functionality, and so we're doing that. And then, like I mentioned, just having this tether to the devices, it's very powerful because we can open up new opportunities for you to offer services. And for example, our devices have these USB ports on them. There's a lot we can do with that. One of the things that a few customers want to do is they want to implement a location, kind of a Bluetooth beacon for proximity detection, and we can do that with our OB devices. They're already in the office, so that's where they're. It's a good position for that. Kind of the way it works is the cloud tether to ObiTalk, the Obihai cloud, as well as the tether to the provisioning piece of the service provider. They work in tandem. There's a logical hierarchy to who wins in the case of a parameter conflict, and it's always going to be the service provider's parameter setting. But then, and so that allows the devices to work together with service provider provisioning as well as the ObiTalk piece. And then for some service providers that maybe you're trying to expand out of their footprint, they have access devices that they manage via SNMP, and that's worked very well for them over the years, but they're trying to expand out of their direct footprint. How are they going to leverage their SNMP infrastructure to look after these devices? So we've actually built an SNMP connector in our cloud so that the service provider can build in the MIBs that we've provided for the OB devices that can be deployed virtually anywhere in the world, and we're able to work with OpenView or SolarWinds, whatever they've got. So like I mentioned, there's a consumer portal. This is the one that we put together for all the BYOD people, and then there's service provider portal, and then there's the APIs for service creation, and then we're in the works to have APIs for all of the elements of the service provider portal as well. So those APIs that we have now are this approved service provider API. That's the one I talked about, where the person brings their device to the ObiTalk portal, they click a button, they pay the service provider, they're making calls. Then there's the service activation code. This is where the device doesn't have anything to do with Obihai's portal. It's just the service provider, but it's still an unknown device to them as it pertains to the end user subscriber. So when the subscriber logs into the service provider's customer portal, they activate a device, and then what they do is they call the API to give them an activation code that they show to the end user. The end user enters that activation code, and then we're able to get the right config from that service provider to that device, which most of the time the companies that are using this piece, they have their own provisioning. Just the service activation code is that piece that allows them to link a subscriber with a SIP account. And this is kind of a neat thing too, because if that person ever, gets a new phone or leaves the company and they want to give that phone to somebody else, they just do a factory reset. The phone is already ZT'd. It already has a zero-touch redirection functionality, so it's already going to go back to the state of a new phone when they factory reset it. But then they can just give it to the new employee, and they go through that activation code process again. The next thing, and this is kind of a trend that's happening more and more, is when you're doing an over-the-top service especially, but actually a lot of the guys that are facilities-based in their own footprint, they need to know the call quality that's happening from these devices. And given that it's not always possible to capture that at the SBC or at your own gateways, because you might not operate your own gateways, having something from the device delivered to the cloud in the form of a report is helpful. You can always use SIP publish to get that information, but being able to grab that via an API or SNMP is quite useful for things like call quality, MOS score of calls, uptime, things like that. And it really allows you to see, for instance, if a subscriber site is starting to, say, trend down in the MOS score, you can look and see what the deal is with that. Either they've got maybe an internal infrastructure issue, or they've got an issue with maybe their upstream or downstream bandwidth and they need to upgrade. The troubleshooting, this is what I mentioned where it's really helpful for troubleshooting. You don't have to have somebody on site to do a lot of things with the device and to interact with the device. And this is all done through that pinhole kind of into the device through the cloud. And then using the P2P functionality and other services. So I've got an example here for the customer that utilizes Twilio. They use Twilio to both receive inbound calls for sales leads and place calls for outbound selling. And the Twilio piece is how they connect to people. But it's all, the end users are typically using maybe a VoIP service from, using another IP phone. So in essence, it's a PSTN, or they're using their cell phone, or they're using a pure PSTN connection. And so based on how, that would be a PSTN connection at Twilio. Well, Twilio also has SIP, but then it doesn't SIP. You can't send a Twilio call to you can only send it to one place as a customer. You can only send it to, in essence, your Twilio SIP trunk. So what we did is we perfected a way to, the SIP URI is actually that OB number, that unique OB number I talked about, but it's a SIP URI. And then the ObiTalk Cloud does the signaling translation to the device that call needs to go to, and then of course the media flows direct from Twilio to the device. So it's a pretty cool thing to do. So just to finish up here, the other thing is the new things that are coming out, new things that are being done in this space that revolve around WebRTC and mobility and voice over LTE. These endpoints that we manufacture, they really have to not be a burden. People want them. People need to have them. They're also going to use an app on their smartphone or the native voice application on their smartphone, but it really needs to work better with them. So this was inspiration to develop the WebRTC client on our product, as well as using XMPP. We have it there. We're really only using it today mostly for the Google stuff, but we also use it, for instance, for the presence applications with a couple call server partners. So there's no reason why we can't do more with that as well. And then Opus, I believe that we're one of the only, if not the only phone that's readily available on the market that supports the Opus codec. And so this really starts to make a lot of sense when you do see someone who's leveraging WebRTC that wants the call to be connected to a hard phone. But remember, you can also use the Obihai phones as a bridging functionality. So you might want to go WebRTC to SIP just using an endpoint. And then AMR wideband is another thing that we're seeing. There's a few larger carriers that want to have that, so that's important. So then this service bridging via the API, again, this is where using the API to connect multiple services, we've really seen that there is a niche there, and it looks like it looks to be expanding. Of it's either some type of a least cost routing, or it's just a way to get the call completed. But this service bridging layer that we have between the logical SIP services or VoIP services and the physical ports, or just doing service to service, is becoming very popular. And then using that cloud aspect and the multi-protocol aspect of the devices to help you create new services. Okay, so in closing, this is just kind of where another kind of look back as to where we've come from with the evolution of VoIP. And it really hasn't been that long since, the main application was, selling those big iron gateways to carriers who were either doing, inter-exchange type trunking applications or calling cards. And that really didn't, it was an opportunity, but it wasn't really where it was at, where it was going. So then with the advent of ubiquitous broadband, then the opportunity came for these little devices that connect regular telephones. Then as we moved up the chain, more sophisticated enterprise applications, and then you start to see a hint of the web in there too. Maybe it's a web portal for management, but this is really what has allowed a lot of us to expand our businesses. The web is there in addition to making the calls using the internet. And now we're seeing a lot of things with social networking, and this is where this possibility lies to maybe selectively federate, or if there'll be a new way that is secure and acceptable that we can build into our products. But as you can see, based on what I've talked about, given our ability to manipulate the device from the cloud with multiple services using multiple protocols, I think that there's a lot of value that's added, especially in this area where the customer's looking to do service to service. So that's really where the cloud management of the VoIP endpoint is critical to this. And not only from the service provider's point of view to be able to manage services and deliver their functionality, but also from a capital outlay point of view. I don't think it'll be long before we all either go online or go to an actual store to buy every IP phone that we buy for the rest of our lives. It won't be a thing of the past where the service provider actually has to put up pallets of units in a warehouse. All right, thank you very much.
So if there are a couple of, let's say, quick questions, because Obihai has here an exhibition spot, so just go there, get your hands dirty on the devices. Sherman will show what he talked about, that it's in reality. And of course, we don't want to get the beer warming up for the social event this evening. So.
And I don't want to leave with any of those devices out there. So if you're interested, see me.
Be sure you are grabbing one. Okay, questions from the audience. I will start a quick one, because you said this. You can connect from your cloud service and manage the devices. What are the security concerns from your customers? Do they express something like, okay, you kind of can monitor them, or is such concern from your
Really not. Now there is kind of that segment of the internet community who's very aware of security threats and how this stuff works, and they come at us every day with questions on, well, how do you do this, how do you do that? And a lot of how our devices communicate depends on how the service provider provisions them, what security aspects they take advantage, they're going to take advantage of. Now, for Obihai, for instance, passwords, the critical thing. Today, we actually do not store passwords for SIP accounts in our cloud. So if a device is ever reset, that's the one thing that the service provider, if they're using our cloud, they would have to go back in and put the password in. Every other parameter, we're going to be able to reprovision, because that config is held in the cloud for that particular device. So anything specific to that device will get reprovisioned, but not the password.
Okay.
Other things are using things like OAuth and tokens. Really helps protect the customer, and we're doing some of that.
Okay. So then the last short question, as I missed some of your presentation. Do the devices support IPv6?
They can. They have the memory headroom to do it. We just haven't committed a date to develop it.
Okay. So thank you, Sherman. And
thank you.
Again, who is interested more, couple of devices to grab and play with. They are available outside.